Hello and welcome to a new episode of our podcast where we will be reviewing another book. Today, we're stepping back in time to the Renaissance, but not to admire the art or the architecture. We're going deeper into the world of Renaissance magic with Anthony Grafton's book, Magus, The Art of Magic from Faustus to Agrippa.
Yeah, it's easy to think of magic as just spells and superstition, but Grafton reveals something much richer. He introduces us to the Magus, not a back-alley sorcerer, but a respected intellectual figure. These were scholars often embedded in universities and royal courts, who saw magic as a key to unlocking the secrets of the universe.
Okay, so these weren't your stereotypical witches huddled over a cauldron. They were more like Renaissance scientists experimenting with the occult.
Exactly, and the Renaissance was the perfect time for this. Imagine, classical knowledge is being rediscovered. There's a thirst for new ideas, and the boundaries between science, religion, and magic are blurrier than ever. It's in this world that we find figures like Dr. Faustus.
Faustus. Most people know him from the legend, the guy who makes a deal with the devil for knowledge. But Grafton digs into the historical Faustus, and he's a much more complex figure, isn't he?
He is. The real Faustus was a scholar deeply engaged in the intellectual currents of his time. He traveled, he wrote, he interacted with other intellectuals, and yes, he practiced magic. Grafton even details some of his specific rituals, giving us a glimpse into the world of a practicing Renaissance magus.
So he wasn't just a character in a morality play. This guy was out there pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable, both intellectually and spiritually. I imagine that created some serious tension, right?
Absolutely. Imagine the internal conflict. On one hand, you're driven by this insatiable curiosity to understand the universe through magic. But on the other, you're living in a world with very strict religious and societal rules. One wrong step could land you in serious trouble, labeled a heretic or worse.
It makes you wonder how they navigated that tightrope. Speaking of pushing boundaries, Grafton also highlights Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. Now, he wasn't just practicing magic, he was trying to legitimize it, to create a whole system for it, right?
That's right. Agrippa wanted to elevate magic from a collection of scattered practices into a coherent philosophical system. His book, 3 Books of Occult Philosophy, became incredibly influential, laying out a framework for understanding magic that drew from various traditions.
Hold on. He's writing the rule book for magic. What made him think that was even possible?
It's a testament to the intellectual ferment of the Renaissance. Agrippa believed that by drawing on ancient wisdom from classical philosophy to Jewish Kabbalah to Christian theology, he could create a unified system. That explained the workings of the universe and humanity's place within it.
So it wasn't just about casting spells, it was about understanding the deeper connections between everything. I'm starting to see why this magic was so appealing to these Renaissance minds.
And that's where the concept of syncretism comes in. These magicians weren't afraid to blend different traditions, to find the common threads that ran through them. They were looking for a universal language, a key to unlock the hidden workings of the cosmos.
So we've got Faustus, the practitioner, out there experimenting and pushing limits, and Agrippa, the systematizer, trying to create a grand unified theory of magic. Sounds like they were both challenging the conventions of their time in very different ways.
They were, and it's this willingness to challenge conventions that really defines the Renaissance magus. They were explorers both intellectually and spiritually, driven by a profound curiosity to understand the world around them.
Okay, I'm completely hooked. So far, we've got risk takers and system builders. But Grafton introduces us to another fascinating figure, Johannes Trithemius. Tell me, how does he fit into this story of Renaissance magic?
Trithemius was a contemporary of Agrippa, and he embodies this fusion of magic and emerging scientific ideas even more explicitly. He was known for his work on cryptography, the art of secret writing, which he presented in a very unique way.
Cryptography. So we're talking codes and ciphers. What does that have to do with magic?
Well, his book Steganographia wasn't just a straightforward cryptography manual. He presented it as a system of angelic magic. It used elaborate tables and diagrams that look like magical symbols, but were actually instructions for encoding and decoding secret messages.
He hid secret codes within what appeared to be magical texts.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What was he trying to achieve with this? Was it just to protect his knowledge from prying eyes?
It was partly about secrecy, yes.
Yeah.
But it also reveals something deeper about the Renaissance mindset. Remember, this was a time when knowledge was power, and sometimes dangerous power. Trithemius was walking a fine line, pushing the boundaries of knowledge while trying to avoid accusations of heresy.
So he used the language of magic to protect his scientific discoveries. It's like he was speaking in code on multiple levels. This is blowing my mind. It's a brilliant example of how intertwined magic and science were during this period. Trithemius wasn't just interested in the practical applications of cryptography. He saw it as a way to tap into hidden forces, to communicate with the divine even.
This is already so much more than I expected. From daring practitioners to system builders to magician coders, this is shaping up to be a fascinating deep dive into a world I never knew existed. And to think we're just getting started, there's so much more to uncover about these Renaissance magicians, their practices, and the dangers they faced. We've been talking about these Renaissance magicians as intellectuals and innovators, but I'm curious about the actual magic. What did their practices look like? Were we talking bubbling cauldrons and chanting spells?
It's tempting to picture something out of a Hollywood movie, but the reality was both more complex and more grounded in the natural world. Renaissance magic was deeply intertwined with what we might consider science today: astronomy, botany, even medicine.
So less about summoning demons and more about understanding the hidden forces of the universe.
Exactly. Many of their practices involved harnessing the power of celestial bodies, using herbs and stones for their specific properties, or crafting talismans inscribed with symbols believed to channel certain energies.
It almost sounds like a very elaborate form of alchemy. Were they trying to turn lead into gold too?
Alchemy was definitely part of their repertoire, but it wasn't just about material transformation. It was about understanding the essence of things, how they interacted, and how they could be manipulated. Remember, they believed the universe was interconnected, a vast web of correspondences.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. But you mentioned talismans earlier. Was that just a fancy word for a good luck charm?
Not quite. Creating a talisman was a serious undertaking, involving intricate rituals, astrological calculations, and a deep understanding of the symbolism embedded in the materials used. It was a way to concentrate and direct specific energies.
So it's not just about carving a symbol on a piece of metal. There was a whole science and philosophy behind it. It's really challenging my preconceptions about what magic actually meant in this context.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. These magicians were meticulous in their work, blending observation, experimentation, and spiritual beliefs into a system that aimed to unlock the secrets of the cosmos.
It sounds like the line between science and magic was much blurrier back then. In fact, you mentioned astrology earlier. Wasn't that considered a legitimate field of study during the Renaissance?
Absolutely. Astrology was seen as a way to understand not just the movements of celestial bodies, but also their influence on human affairs, health, even the fate of nations. It wasn't the fringe belief it might be considered today.
That's amazing. It really makes you wonder how much of what we consider magical today was simply part of the accepted body of knowledge back then.
It's a great reminder that knowledge and what is considered acceptable or scientific is constantly evolving. What was groundbreaking in one era can become obsolete or even ridiculed in another.
Okay, so we've talked about the magicians, their practices, and the intellectual climate they operated in. But what about the risks? We touched on the dangers of being labeled a heretic earlier. Can you tell us more about the persecution these magicians faced?
Unfortunately, the very nature of their work put them in a precarious position. The church, while sometimes a patron of the arts and sciences, was also wary of anything that challenged its authority or doctrines. Magic, with its claims of tapping into hidden powers, was often seen as a threat.
So even though they saw themselves as uncovering the secrets of God's creation, they could still be accused of dabbling in forbidden knowledge. That seems like a very dangerous tightrope to walk.
It was. Grafton details several instances of persecution against these magicians. Agrippa, for example, was constantly harassed, forced to move from city to city to avoid accusations of heresy. He even had some of his works banned.
Wow, so even with his attempts to legitimize magic, he still faced serious opposition. It makes you wonder how much of their work might have been lost or suppressed due to this fear of persecution.
It's a valid point. We may never know the full extent of their knowledge, or the impact they could have had if they had been free to pursue their work without fear of reprisal.
This is getting pretty heavy. It sounds like these magicians were incredibly brave, pushing the boundaries of knowledge despite the very real dangers involved. But did their work have any lasting impact? Did any of their ideas survive the church's crackdown on magic?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the heart of why understanding Renaissance magic is so relevant even today. While the church eventually succeeded in suppressing many of these practices, labeling them as heresy, the ideas and innovations of the Renaissance Magus didn't just disappear, they went underground, influencing other fields and continuing to shape Western thought in subtle but profound ways.
That's fascinating. So even though magic was condemned, its influence continued to ripple through other areas of knowledge. Can you give us some specific examples of how that happened?
Take the emphasis on observation and experimentation that was central to Renaissance magic. These were practices that would later become cornerstones of the scientific method. The Magus' meticulous study of the natural world, their attempts to understand its hidden mechanisms, laid the groundwork for later scientific breakthroughs.
So you're saying that these magicians, who are often condemned by the church, might have actually helped pave the way for the scientific revolution. That's a pretty ironic twist.
It is, and it highlights how interconnected history can be. The pursuit of knowledge doesn't always follow a straight path. What might be considered heresy in one era can become the foundation for scientific progress in another.
That's an important reminder, especially today when it's easy to dismiss anything that falls outside the realm of accepted science. We might be missing out on some valuable insights by being too quick to judge.
Exactly, and it's not just about the physical sciences. The Magus' exploration of the human psyche, their fascination with symbolism and archetypes, those ideas found fertile ground in other fields like psychology, art, and literature.
So their influence wasn't limited to the scientific world. They were also tapping into something deeper, something that continues to resonate with us today. What would you say is the most enduring legacy of these Renaissance magicians? What can we learn from them even centuries later?
I think their most enduring legacy is their spirit of inquiry, their refusal to accept the limits of conventional thinking. They were driven by a profound curiosity to understand the universe, to unravel its mysteries, even if it meant risking their reputations or their lives.
It's that willingness to challenge the status quo that's so inspiring. They remind us that knowledge isn't static. It's constantly evolving, and that the most important discoveries often happen when we dare to look beyond the accepted boundaries, to explore the fringes of what's known and unknown.
And I think there's another important lesson here, one that's particularly relevant in our current age of information overload. The Renaissance Magus understood that knowledge wasn't just about accumulating facts. It was about synthesis, about connecting the dots, about seeing the bigger picture. They were masters of integrating knowledge from different sources, weaving together diverse strands of thought into a coherent whole.
That's a skill we could all benefit from cultivating, especially today when we're bombarded with information from all sides. It's not enough to just consume information. We need to learn how to filter it, to make sense of it, to integrate it into our own understanding of the world.
Absolutely. The Renaissance Magus offers us a model for how to approach knowledge in a holistic way, how to see the connections between seemingly disparate ideas, and how to use knowledge to create something new, something meaningful.
This has been an incredible journey. We started with what seemed like a simple premise, Renaissance magic. But we've uncovered so much more than that. We've explored the lives of these fascinating figures, the complexities of their practices, the dangers they faced, and the enduring legacy they left behind. It's made me realize that history is full of surprises, and that sometimes the most unorthodox paths lead to the most profound discoveries.
And that's the beauty of exploring the past. It not only helps us understand where we came from, but it also offers us new perspectives on the present, and perhaps even some guidance for the future.
Well said. This deep dive has been a true eye-opener, challenging my preconceptions about magic and revealing its deep connections to science, religion, and the evolution of human thought. I hope our listeners have enjoyed this journey as much as we have, and perhaps it will inspire some of you to delve deeper into the world of Renaissance magic and see what hidden treasures you can uncover.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep the spirit of the Magus alive.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.